The village road was swallowed by the night, and a thick fog clung to the ground, swirling around Arslan's ankles like ghostly fingers. He clutched the strap of his backpack, its weight a poor comfort against the chilling silence. Each house he passed was a skeleton, with sagging roofs and windows that stared into the darkness like hollow, dead eyes. His flashlight flickered, its weak beam struggling to pierce the gloom. This shortcut was supposed to save him time, but every instinct was screaming at him to turn back. A low growl echoed from somewhere deep in the woods, and the rustling leaves nearby made his heart leap into his throat. He wasn't just alone. He felt watched. The air grew colder, and the mist seemed to press in on him, suffocating the weak light. He took another hesitant step, his breath catching in his chest. What was that sound? It wasn't the wind. It was something else, something that didn't belong in the natural world. He quickened his pace, his boots crunching on the gravel, a sound that seemed far too loud in the oppressive quiet. The feeling of being an intruder grew stronger with every meter he covered. As he passed a gnarled, ancient-looking tree, a faint glint of metal caught his eye, nestled among the twisted roots. Curiosity, a dangerous thing in a place like this, got the better of him. He crouched down, pushing aside damp leaves to uncover a silver bracelet. It was tarnished with age, but its delicate design was still visible, adorned with tiny bells. The moment his fingers brushed against the cold metal, a strange sensation shot up his arm. The bells began to jingle softly, a melodic yet unnerving sound that had no earthly cause. A low, cold hum vibrated through the air, seeming to come from the bracelet itself. The fog, which had been a passive shroud, now became an active participant. It thickened rapidly, coiling around him like a serpent, obscuring his vision until the world was just a few feet of ghostly white. The shadows at the edge of his light seemed to twitch and stretch, leaning in as if to get a better look. His heartbeat hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum against the hum of the bracelet and the whisper of the fog. He felt a presence now, something ancient and aware, and it knew he was holding its treasure. He scrambled to his feet, the bracelet clutched in his hand, its humming a constant, chilling vibration. The forest beyond the tree was no longer just a collection of old wood. It was a living, breathing entity. The branches twisted into grotesque shapes, reaching out like claws ready to snatch him from the path. Strange, fleeting shadows darted between the trunks, their movements too fast, too fluid to be human or animal. He heard footsteps, but they weren't his own. They were light, echoing the eerie humming of the bracelet, sometimes falling into step with him, other times falling just behind. He tried to run, but his legs felt heavy, as if the fog itself were holding him back. The jingling of the bells grew more insistent, a frantic, tiny alarm he couldn't silence. Then, a new sound cut through the noise, a soft cry, fragile and filled with sorrow, that seemed to come from right beside him. He froze, his blood running cold. Through the swirling mist, a figure began to take shape. It was a teenage girl, her feet bare on the cold, damp ground. She wore a simple, old-fashioned village dress, the kind you'd only see in old photographs. Her long, dark hair was plastered to her pale face, obscuring most of her features. But her eyes were visible, and they were unnervingly calm, fixed on him with an intensity that rooted him to the spot. There was no fear in them, no surprise, only a quiet, patient expectation. She took a step closer, and he noticed she cast no shadow in the weak light of his flashlight. The fog curled around her feet, but didn't seem to touch her. Her lips parted, and a voice, barely a whisper, floated through the air, carrying a chilling question that he already knew the answer to.
"Have you?"
she whispered, her gaze dropping to the bracelet in his hand. "Found what belongs to me." The humming stopped, and the only sound left was the frantic thumping of his own heart. Despite his fear, a strange pull drew Arslan to walk beside the ghostly girl. It was as if the entire forest held its breath. The chirping crickets fell silent, leaving a void that amplified every sound. The crunch of their footsteps, the snap of a twig underfoot, the rustling of unseen things in the undergrowth, and accompanying it all, the soft, rhythmic jingle of the bracelet on her wrist. The sound was delicate, almost musical, yet it sent shivers down his spine. They walked without a word for what felt like an eternity, the path illuminated only by the weak beam of Arslan's flashlight and the moon's filtered glow. Finally, she spoke, her voice a whisper that seemed to ride on the wind itself. She told him she had been trying to find her way home for years, but she could never remember the path. Each time she tried, the forest seemed to change, to rearrange itself, trapping her in an endless loop of forgotten trails. As she spoke, Arslan watched in disbelief as the woods responded to her words. The shadows of the gnarled trees stretched and twisted, reaching out like skeletal fingers. A thick, soupy fog began to curl up from the ground, swirling around their ankles and obscuring the path just moments after they passed. The forest felt alive, breathing, watching their every move. The air grew heavy, thick, with an unspoken sorrow and a palpable sense of ancient magic. The jingling of the bracelet seemed to get a little louder, a lonely beacon in the oppressive quiet. Arslan's heart hammered against his ribs, but he kept walking, his flashlight beam cutting a nervous, trembling path through the encroaching darkness. He didn't know why, but he felt he had to see this through. Just as the feeling of being watched became almost unbearable, the dense trees suddenly gave way. They stepped into a small, circular clearing. In its center stood a house, or what was left of one. It was a ruin, long abandoned and reclaimed by nature. Tangled vines crept up its walls like thick green veins, choking the life from the decaying wood. The windows were dark, broken eyes staring out into the night, and the walls themselves seemed to sag and warp, as if they were tired of standing. At that moment, the clouds overhead parted, and a beam of moonlight pierced the gloom, bathing the derelict house in a cold, ethereal glow. It looked like a tomb. The girl stopped at the edge of the overgrown path, her translucent form gazing at the ruined structure. A faint, bittersweet smile touched her lips. "This is where I lived," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sighing wind. Or tried to. Her words hung in the air, full of a deep, ancient sadness. Then she began to fade. Her form wavered, becoming more transparent with each passing second, until she dissolved completely into the swirling mist. All that remained was the final, soft echo of her bracelet's jingle, a sound that seemed to imprint itself onto the very air of the clearing. Arslan stood frozen, his flashlight beam flickering wildly, casting, dancing, frantic shadows across the abandoned house and the empty space where she had just been. He was alone again, but the silence was now heavier, filled with the presence of her absence. A deep chill settled over Arslan, a cold that had nothing to do with the night air. He had to get out of there. He turned and stumbled back the way he came, retracing his steps down the foggy village road. But the forest wasn't done with him. The shadows seemed to follow, stretching long and distorted across his path, mimicking his hurried movements. The oppressive silence was broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing, and the phantom echo that played over and over in his mind. The soft, haunting jingle of the bracelet. It was behind him, beside him, everywhere. He picked up his pace, breaking into a jog, then a run. The fog thickened, trying to swallow him. But he pushed on, the village lights a distant, desperate promise. When he finally burst from the edge of the trees, gasping for breath, the memory of the girl, her lonely house, and the living forest was burned into his mind forever, a chilling story he would carry with him for the rest of his days. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more tales from the shadows.